Hello, class. If you are joining us online or you're watching later pre-recorded, you are joining my English 2307 Beginning Creative Writing Poetry. My name is A.R. Rogers, and I am also the coordinator for a few of our events here in the Creative Writing Department. This particular event is part of the Limestone Conversations, presently a series where we bring in authors to our in-person and synchronous online classes. And this is the first of this semester. So we are going to be hosting poet Julie Poole today. And snaps. Snaps. So I am going to read her bio so you have a little bit of context for her, and then she's going to step in and lead us in a workshop and talk about obsession, which I personally am deeply excited about. Poets are pretty obsessive people, and I think that's just something we all have to confront and accept. So, Julie Poole is a poet, journalist, and filmmaker based in Austin. As a 2023 National Fellow at USC Annenberg, she wrote about the landscape of healthcare in Texas. She received support from the Economic Hardship Reporting Project to write about unpaid caregiving in Yes Magazine, a piece that was anthologized for Going for Broke, Living on the Edge in the World's Richest Country. Her writing has appeared in Scalawag, The Texas Observer, Texas Monthly, Slate, and The Nation. She has written 2 poetry collections, Bright Specimen, a finalist for the Writers League of Texas Book Award, and Gorgeous Freak. Everyone, please help me welcome Julie Poole.
Hey, I'm so happy to be with y'all today. This is a really fun moment for me. One of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk a lot about myself, and then I'm hoping to get to know you too, because that's what makes this a conversation. But one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately and throughout my journey as a writer and a poet is this realization that poetry is not separate from your life. It's not separate from my life. Like, poetry is not something that is outside of me. It's something that's within me. And so I'm always interacting with it. It's not something that is, I'm never without it. I never feel like poetry is not in my life. So I'm going to get a little bit closer to this idea of how poetry shows up for me, and I would love to talk to you about how it shows up for you as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a little bit of storytelling, because I think it's important to get to know everyone's background. And poets are complicated. We have stuff that's happened in our lives, and so I just wanted to start off with like a brief kind of journey that captures how I came to write poetry, how I came to writing in general. So it's been a long journey for me to get to this point, but language has always been part of my life. So one thing I want to talk about is I'll start off with high school. So high school for me really sucked, really sucked. I was what people might say in air quotes, a very troubled student. So I did not show up to classes. Throughout my time in high school, I went to many different high schools throughout my youth. And the common theme for me was chronic, what is it? A chronic absence, just not showing up, not going to school. And that got so bad that at some point I talked to, must have been an advisor, who said, so check it out. You're going to be 19 when you graduate if you continue on this path. And so I was like, wow, okay, that's heavy. That's something that I was really embarrassed about happening in my life. So I was like, I am just going to drop out. So I dropped out and I got a GED, with no real plans other than to go directly to work, to get a job. So I always felt like I was smart enough to go to college, but I didn't know how to get there. So I had a very hard time navigating that system as an adult because no one else in my family had done that before. So I remember I'm from Seattle, Washington. I moved to Seattle when I'm about 18. And of course, my first few jobs are working at an Amazon warehouse in Seattle. And if there's anything that's going to make you question your life more, manual labor, tons of lifting, constant work on your feet, and this sort of sense that maybe this was the best I could do. So I was happy to get a job because I had been a temp for a long time at Amazon, and then I became a full-time employee. And at that time, Amazon was just focused on books. So I remember like these big watershed moments. Does anyone remember when the first Harry Potter book arrived on the scene? Anyone read Harry Potter in this room? Kind of? Okay. I saw a lot of Harry Potter in the warehouse, like on the conveyor belt, over and over and over again. And those are the books I saw. I was packing them for Christmas, making sure everyone got their J.K. Rowling, which I've never read. And I was thinking, like, as I'm watching this, maybe one day my book will be on this conveyor belt, or maybe one day I'll have that experience where I'm the one creating something instead of packing it into a box. So this is an important moment because I decide to leave Amazon, and I had stock options. I'm going to tell you, this is actually in retrospect a huge mistake. No, I'm joking. But I was like, I'm going to go to school. And so I left Amazon, and of course, like the stock years later was like worth hundreds of dollars, and I missed out on the opportunity to become what I could have been, a multimillionaire, right? But I became a poet. Shit. Oh. So I did that. I started off at Seattle Central Community College, and I had no idea what to do. I walked into the building and I was like, I don't know how to enroll for a class. I didn't know financial aid existed. I had no one to like really help me through that system. And so I figured it out. I figured that there was such a thing as financial aid and the FAFSA and all these other things. And from there, I spent a total of 6 years in school. So as you know, like typically you go to a community college or to transfer to another school, or to leave with a skill set that'll directly put you in the path for another career right away. So it took me a really long time because again, I dropped out, went back, dropped out, went back. And this is a pivotal moment because at that time, I knew that I had it within me to write. I just didn't know how to get there. And I became obsessed with this idea that higher education was this unreachable thing in my life. And I decided if I just get into an Ivy League school, my life will completely change. So that's what I tried to do. I applied to Columbia University because they had a creative writing program. It was one of the few undergraduate universities that had a creative writing program at the time. And so I felt it was very, very important for me to get into this school and that it would prove to me that I was smart, that I had made it, that I was no longer a dropout, all this other thing, all these things that I thought about myself, I thought would be disproved if I just got into this university. So I applied and they rejected me. And I was like, you know what? I'm pissed about that. I'm gonna do this again. So I waited a few more years and I brought up my GPA when I was at Seattle Central and joined Phi Beta Cat, all this. I joined all the things. I did all the things. And then I applied again, and this time I got in. So this is where I was first exposed to what you might call the writing workshop. And the tradition of the writing workshop is really a tradition that comes out of a very, how would you describe it? Well, let's just say that when writing workshops first started out, it was very male dominated, very critique based. And it was really about ripping each other's poems to shreds. Whoever lasted the longest was the strongest writer, right? So it's kind of survival of the fittest. So when I was in school, I had this experience of being in workshop and workshopping stories, workshopping poems, workshopping other things, and having this sense that the students were all, not all of them, but in a few instances, we were making personal digs at each other through each other's poems. So it was that like kind of competitive. It was very icky. But this is the way kind of the workshop evolved over the years. I do not teach workshop like that anymore. I never did. I decided that that sort of critique really gets under, what it really does is it undermines our capacity to be naturally creative and to listen to ourselves. So the way you become a better poet isn't by how much you're critiquing each other. It's really about how much you're writing and getting to know yourself and getting to know the work of other poets. It seems pretty obvious and intuitive. But unfortunately, that wasn't my experience. It was more, I wouldn't say the Hunger Games or anything that dramatic, but it was not nice. It was not nice. So I entered that space. And while I was at Columbia, I had this experience with a professor that really changed a lot of things for me. And I was in a class about the lyric essay. Anyone familiar with the lyric essay? Okay, so the lyric essay, hey, okay, so the lyric essay really blends two forms, poetry and then prose. So you're blending these two forms together to create something that's hybrid, that feels, it feels like poetry and then it feels like prose, it feels like nonfiction, and it kind of goes back and forth. And so I was writing a lot of work that was based on my lived experience in New York. Not having enough food, not having access to healthcare, certain things like that. And at one point, this professor and I had this conversation in the classroom, and she said, I don't think people really want to read about class or poverty in literature. And in my head, I was thinking, that's not true. That's not true. Because I had read a book called Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. And that book had changed my life because that was the first book that I had read from a writer who had lived through the impacts of poverty, right? So I knew that wasn't true, but I internalized it and I really believed her. So I started to censor myself. And I was in another class with her, and that's when I started to write poetry. And she told me, this is better, like, this is better work. And what she was essentially saying was, in my mind, was that you did a better job of suppressing yourself. You did a better job of not talking about your life. So I had made it pretty. I'd kind of fluffed it up. And so my poems were good, but they weren't poems that authentically represented my experience at the time. And I think that when I talk about poetry not being separate from your life, I'm talking about that whatever you're experiencing currently, that is material for your work, for your poems. And this is really critical because you'll find that everything that you're interested in leads back to your perspective as an artist. So we all have a particular aesthetic. What you are interested in shows up in your poems. And this is really profoundly important. So I want to talk a little bit more about the way that I returned to poetry after that, because I pretty much stopped writing after I graduated from Columbia. In fact, the first thing I did after I graduated from Columbia was I moved back to Seattle and I got a job as a dishwasher, which seems like a very glamorous move, right? So I felt like that was my best option at the time. I couldn't get an internship at the big 5 publishers because at the time, internships were unpaid. They're paid very little still. So I felt like there was like a clear blockade after I graduated, that if I wanted to participate in literature, I needed money. And since I didn't have money, I couldn't participate in literature. So I moved back home. I worked as a dishwasher at a coffee shop, but I always kept like poems in my back pocket. And these are poems by other poets. So I read Paradise Lost. I read all these poems that became important to me. I tried to memorize it while I was washing dishes, to kind of keep poetry within my life. And then after that, I had what might be called like a rock bottom moment. Has anyone had a rock bottom moment in life? Hell yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. Thank you so much. I dropped an F-bomb because I'm so glad you admitted you have had a rock bottom moment. Okay, so my rock bottom moment, and this leads into my return to poetry, I promise this is important, was my mom had lost her house. I had lost my job and I went to like get a refill of medications because I was depressed. And those medications, I got a new refill for, I was taking medications for depression. And I got on a new medication and it didn't jive well with my body or my system. And my brain rebelled in a terrible way. I became very dissociated with reality. I ended up in a hospital for a month. While I was in the hospital, I lost my job. I got a new job. I lost that job. I lost my place to live. What else? I had an internship. I lost that. I had a cat. Luckily, my sister took my cat, so I didn't lose my cat, thank God. But this is to say that rock bottom moment, when you feel like everything's been pulled out from underneath you, was pivotal because when I got out, after being homeless, moving into transitional housing, my identity as a writer was completely shaken. So I had to rebuild it. And one of the ways I rebuilt my identity was by thinking about how do I engage with language when it feels impossible. I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't concentrate. It's like my brain wasn't able to process any information. Does anyone feel like that sometimes? You're just like, I can't remember anything. I can't remember shit. I can't even write a sentence. What's wrong with me? I need to write a paragraph. I can't even write a paragraph. So I had one of those moments where I was like, I can't grab hold of language. I can't make this happen. So I was like, okay, so I can't read books. I can't focus. So has anyone here read graphic novels before? Oh my gosh, hell yeah, graphic novels. Oh, so I love graphic novels because I was still able to engage with stories and read and be involved with language in a different capacity. So I started to read all these comic books about Superman and Lois Lane. And this is where obsession comes in. Okay. So I became obsessed with Superman and Lois Lane. And because I couldn't write prose anymore, I started writing poems about Superman and Lois Lane and what would happen if Superman is suddenly like this big loser. And he's not interested in saving the world anymore. He's not interested in being the hero. He's like on his couch, watching TV, working remotely. Like he's given up. And so I was like trying to imagine what this would be like, what would this new universe look like? And then I thought, well, what would Lois Lane's experience be like? So I thought, okay, she's a journalist. Journalism jobs no longer. She's out of work too. She's really struggling. She wants to do stuff and she's like trying to like reach Superman, but he's so into himself that she can't. And so I was just like trying to like find a way to stay involved with language and develop this world for myself. So I became obsessed with recreating the Lois Lane Superman narrative. And I started writing poems about it. And those poems ended up being a part of my MFA application that led me to Austin, Texas, to UT, to the New Writers Project later on. So this is why I think that when you are at a loss, or maybe even now, is to focus in on what is captivating you, what is taking all of your attention. If you're on your phone, what are you looking at? If you're buying something, what are you buying? What are these things in your life that you're focused on? And why are you focused on them? Because that information provides clues and insight into what you're interested in as an artist. Okay, so I'm going to give you an embarrassing example of what I'm currently really into. Okay. This says a lot about me. Has anyone heard of the show? Bachelor? Okay. Okay, someone has heard of it. Someone has heard of it here. I'm glad you've heard of it. Okay. In case you haven't heard of it, the premise of the show is you have one man who is dating approximately 35 women, and he needs to narrow it down to the person he will spend the rest of his life with. Okay? So this show has been on for many, many different seasons. And I had to like really think about why I'm obsessed with this show, because this actually relates to the work I've been doing for years, but I didn't know it. So the plot of the show is pretty repetitive, right? We all know what's going to happen. There's going to be drama. Someone gets eliminated. Another person gets eliminated. Another person gets eliminated. There's more drama. There's indecision. Oh my God, who am I going to date? Who's, whatever. And then it's this big sort of construct. It's this juggernaut that has been within the zeitgeist and within culture for a very long time. So what is the social significance of this show? This is really critical. Over the years, it's changed. So it's still a very problematic show. In so many different ways. It's hard to to fully grasp how problematic this show, from the racism, the sexism, to the, you know, the homophobia, to the lack of complete awareness that there are different sorts of love narratives in society today, right? So there has not been a queer bachelor yet, right? There has not been a trans person on this show yet. And so that is a moment that I've been waiting for, because that is a moment that within the cultural history, we will notice that more people are being included into mainstream narratives. So I watch this show and I'm constantly thinking about it. And part of the reason I'm thinking about it is that there is a system, a language system, that is involved with the show. So I don't know if anyone wants to throw out some words, but what are some key things that happen in the show?
Elimination.
Elimination.
One.
Yes. Roses. Yeah, rose is key. Very symbolic. Anything else?
Performative affection.
Okay, yes, I love it. Performative affection. You can tell me where else are thinking. You all know it, you've seen it.
Sexual advances.
Oh, yes. We have those. Who kissed who, all this stuff. So we have rose ceremony, we have roses, we have hometowns. We have finding my person, right? We have what? What drama? We have tons of drama. We have drama. We have group dates. We have one-on-one dates. We have first impression roses. So we have this whole lexicon of language to pull from. So I'm going to read to you an example of how I might fold an obsession into my own creative work. And I'm going to refrain from any judgment about this poem that I wrote. Because I wrote it quickly, and I want to pass on to you, do not judge your work. This is not going to be like chipped into stone anywhere. You know, poetry is about practice, it's about imperfection. So I'm going to read this poem. I'm going to take a sip of water first. Okay. This is called There's a Rose for This Feeling. Monumental journey, my person, my wife, my integrity. I'm trying to find my wife. Open up, one-on-ones, two-on-ones, elimination. First impression, rose, international, intentional, the final rose, connection. I'm just trying to find a connection. My person, my rose, hometowns, group dates, family, rose, rose ceremony. Send someone home, vulnerability, women tell all, comfort zone, hot seat, fantasy suites. Here for the right reasons. There are other women at the end of this. Live from our studios. Welcome to Bachelor Nation, Rose Nation, looking for love. There's a rose on the table. There's a proposal at the end of this. There is an end. There is a rose, a symbol, a rose. Okay, So I modeled how to do this. Now I'm gonna turn it over to you. But first I want to say that what I realized by doing this exercise is that my obsession with The Bachelor is not that it is a semi-entertaining show. And by that I mean sometimes I'm watching it and I'm like completely zoning out because I've seen it all before. So what I'm really interested in is this element of vulnerability and this element that everyone is lonely in some way. And that is probably why I watch the show, is that everyone has this feeling. I'm looking for my person. I'm lonely. If I don't find my person, I'll be lonely forever. So there's this very big sort of interplay. There's big stakes. And this is a very human experience. And this shows up in my work. Loneliness is a huge thing. So this is why I now understand that I watch The Bachelor, because I'm trying to understand myself, write poetry, and get at the bottom of this thing called loneliness and how to stop it. No, I'm joking. But it's like, it's important to figure out why we consume the media and other things that we consume, because that tells us about the art we're creating. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna set a timer here for y'all. And this is where I'm gonna turn it to you. And you're gonna journal, just like this is stream of consciousness. You're not really thinking of anything other than two things. What are you obsessed with? You don't want the word obsession, please change it. Could be anything. What's captivating your attention? And if you can, why? And if you feel like inspired to write any words that come up, do that, because this could be a good place to write a poem from. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So I'm going to set a timer and we'll write for, is it okay? AR, how much time would you okay? Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and do 7 minutes, and then I'd love to hear from you. All right. Yay, I'm not gonna pick on anyone or call y'all out to tell me about your obsessions. Okay, you heard that. Okay, so we'll set a timer here and I'll be writing about my other obsessions alongside of you. All right, so good luck. Yes, no peeking, no peeking. Okay, this is where I listen. I have shared openly one of my obsessions with you, and I would love to hear what you're obsessed with and how it's showing up in your work. If it's not, if you would consider it. So yes, please, let's hear it. Woohoo! Share time. All right, yeah.
I spend a lot of time collecting trading cards with fantasy art on them. And it's become an obsession where after work, I sit on my laptop and I look at them and I memorize the artists. And so I'm like, oh, that's Jen Avon, that's Steve Belladin. And I try to impress my friends by collecting these little pictures. And I have not acknowledged that my art is what I spend the vast majority of my time doing.
Oh, wow, awesome. Okay, so why do you think you're drawn to this specifically?
I think it is, I can get right into it. My mom died when I was very young, and my dad was like, look at this, play this game with me, it'll be fun. And so I played this trading card game, and we play it for days sometimes as a way to not think about it. And I keep it with me still because it's a way to engage with art free of expectation.
Wow.
Because I get to look at these little pictures of castles and dragons, and they have text, the rules and I don't read them, so I'm not good at that, but I like to look at the pictures. And collecting them and looking at them and sorting them in terms of, I want a bunch that look like this, I want a bunch that look like that. It lets me feel like like that art is still a part of my life when I don't have the energy and I don't have the time and I'm off a shift and I can't find a way to engage with art that speaks to a real context. So I spend a lot of time organizing large lists of little fantasy postcards.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I would, is there anyone here familiar with acrostic poetry? Okay. Yeah. All right. Critically important that visual imagery and poetry are so tied together. So it might be a really fun experiment to see what comes up if you were to pair those images with a poem. Right? Cool. Getting some good ideas. All right. All right. So who's next?
Go next. What I'm currently captivated with or like obsessed with is Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
They have a recent anime that came out like last year in October and just recently ended. It's called Daima. And the creator of Dragon Ball passed away last year, and this show was like the last thing he actually worked on with Dragon Ball.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
I kind of feel like in his honor, just like actually watching this. Like,
Yeah.
little piece, because when he passed away, I thought that was pretty sad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and Dragon Ball has been like a big part of my childhood because that helped me make a connection with like my older brother
Mhm.
and even with my brother-in-law. So Dragon Ball like really helped me make like friendships and just like connect with other family members.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Our obsessions and poetry as a form is a way to connect, whether or not it's with yourself, whether or not it's with the reader, whether or not it's like with the divine. Like this is what it's all about, is being able to incorporate the things we love and merge that with language. Yeah, cool. All right, who's next? I'm so excited about this. This is inspiring, right? She got a teacher voice. All right, I'd love to hear. Yeah.
I'm watching this show called That Ryan. It's like a CIA show where they're like taking down terrorists or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I watched a couple shows like that I really enjoy. With my dad and stuff, but I think part of what captivates me about watching like really like hardcore stuff like that, like military shows and stuff, is one, there's like pretty clear like bad guys and stuff, so it's kind of easy to be like kind of take out some of your anger or some of your bad feelings on them because they're like, you know, terrorists or whatever. And also yeah, I think it's also easier to when you're in like watching something really hardcore, to then it kind of makes you feel a little bit better about some of the stuff that's like not life and or death that you're like struggling with in your life, like whatever sort of emotional problems, and you'd be like, oh, okay, well, at least I'm not that guy. You know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think that that's why the art and the media and everything that we consume tells us so much about what we're really truly desiring in our lives. You know, it actually might even tell us a little bit about what the direction we're going in is. You know, whether that's I'm interested in narratives that have a hero. You know, that's something that's really kind of absent sometimes, you know, in life, where we don't have that sort of central character that we're rooting for. So yeah, it's very valuable to have that information. All right, I want to hear from some of the quiet folks because I was shy and I can see you. I know you have thoughts. I know you have a ton to say. All right. Can I ask you? Yeah.
Well, I didn't pick like a form of media,
Mhm.
but something I've been obsessed with for like the past couple of years is just like the genuineness in people. Like I took a public speaking class last year, and I always like love to watch the people go and speak. It's like you can tell they're trying to not be nervous, but like you can see it through the little flickers of nervousness, like within the speak, like the way their voice shakes and the way they look around the room and stuff. Just like genuine stuff like that, because I feel like people mask it a lot. And I feel like they mask it so much, it's hard to like be vulnerable with people. So I always like look for like genuineness wherever I go. And I think a lot of that is because of like, I grew up homeschooled, so I didn't like see a lot of kids my age. I didn't like experience a lot of like genuineness, because a lot of homeschool kids are kind of quiet with themselves. So I think I just search for that. Never, I can't think of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is such an important thing to have show up in your poems too, is that authenticity and that genuineness. And yeah, it like even public speaking is very, very hard for me. I love that you pointed out all the little things because I like my hands shake, my voice shakes and everything. This is hard. And it's hard for you too, just sharing with me. But these connections are so critical to feeling a part of the fabric of life and feeling like everyone in this room has something to offer, whether or not you go on to write a million other poems or do something completely different. You're always still fundamentally, in my opinion, everyone who's been through a poetry workshop is still like still part of it is still a poet for the rest of your life, unfortunately. Right? That is going to be with you forever because it changes how you see the world. It makes you think about, what do I really value? I value genuine interactions. So that's something that will continue to shape your life. That's huge. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. All right. I'm gonna pick on someone else. One more? Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, should we jump into Q&A now or? Okay, yeah. Throw it at me. I know you want to know, how do I get rich? How do I publish? How do I get an agent, right? All of it. I can tell you everything. All right. Yeah.
Hi, so a question I really wanted to ask, because all the artists I know in my life have a different answer to it. What, you mentioned the poetry is not separate from your life, it's a part of you, it's intrinsic to how you interact with things. When things happen in your life, is it the first thing you go to? Do you find yourself making poetry almost as a way to respond emotionally to things? Or does it come after? Do you experience something fully? Do you maybe like close a phase in your life or something like that, and then with retrospect, write about it? Which one of those sounds more consistent?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think it's always evolving. I've kept a journal since I was 12, 13 years old. I write every day. I was told by a therapist that I should journal as an outlet for my rage. She didn't say that. She didn't say directly like, you're a really angry kid, you need to journal. But I kept that throughout my life, and every morning that's how I connect with myself. And so sometimes that comes out very fragmented, and poetry is a very fragmented form. So when you cannot complete a thought, I think that poetry is a great way to connect with that. Poetry does not expect from you to understand yourself or the world fully. It leaves room for things to be murky, to be mysterious. So yeah, I think that's where I land on that. Yeah.
So for what I want to do when I grow up, I'm writing up. For a career, is be a writer, and I never thought about how you can get an agent or where to find them. Where
Yeah.
did you find an agent?
Oh, $1 million question. I don't have an agent. No, she doesn't have an agent. Oh, I will get an agent. I promise you. And then I'll tell you everything. But no, so I think like if my advice is an agent is there to sell your book, right? So you have to have something that's complete and finished because they are there as a middleman to sell it to a publisher. And then the publisher is the one that comes in and edits it, and then you have a marketing team, and all of that good stuff. But really what you're gonna wanna do is to publish right now. Get yourself in the magazines, get yourself onto websites, do as much of that groundwork as you can, because that starts to establish, does everyone know what a CV is? Yeah, so a CV is a list of everything you've done as a creative person. So your publications, if you've done any writing residencies, if you've gotten any grants, the government has given you a fellowship or any money, you write that on your CV. And then your CV gets really nice and long. And then you publish all this stuff. And then sometimes agents find you, which is really fun, where an agent will be like, I really want the next up and coming writer. And they'll stumble across something that you've written and say, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And they'll reach out to you and say, hey, do you have a book? Typically, what happens though is you query an agent and you say, hey, this is a bit about me. This is where I've been published. This is what I'm working on. I have a completed, finished manuscript. And then you wait and they get back to you. So here's what a lot of people don't tell you. How many agents do you think you'd have to query in order to get an agent?
A lot, probably.
A lot, okay. So throw out some numbers here. 30? Okay, yeah, that's a good number. So
What did you say, 3?
I said third.
Three. Oh, I thought you said 30. I was like, no. So a lot of folks that I've spoken to, the ballpark range are reaching out to anywhere between 40 and 60 agents. So writing is competitive. So what you're doing is, this is where obsessions are really great, right? You're obsessed about your work first. You're obsessed about your writing first. Everything else will follow naturally from that. If you, this is the mistake I've made, was being obsessed about getting an agent and less obsessed about my work. And that meant I wasn't publishing anything. I was just like keeping my fingers crossed, wishing and dreaming. Does that make sense? All right, cool. All right, yeah.
Do you think that advice kind of overlaps with writers who don't really want social media presence or like the following? Oh, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Is it to get people to read your work.
Yeah. So I'm no surprise, everyone, we live in a capitalist society where followers equal a certain amount of clout, right? So that people that are Instagram influencers who have maybe 2 million followers, agents might reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to write a book? And then they'll be like, yeah, sure, I'll write a book, but actually a ghostwriter will write that book sometimes. And so these are like little truths that have been in the industry for a while, but are particularly prevalent right now. But I don't think that is the only way. I hope it's not. I hope it isn't. Because what I'm noticing is that people are tired. People are, I wouldn't say bored with social media, but overwhelmed by it. And so I've heard from agents who are like, yeah, we don't care how many followers you have, or we don't care about your social media presence, but when it comes to writing and how many books are published every single year, which is an insane number, people do have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. You have to know what you have to offer. So that's an aspect too. I'm navigating this right now. And I think it's a great thing to think about as an artist is to ask yourself this question: how do I want to show up in the world? What do I want people to know me for? And then from that, you can make decisions like, do I want to participate in this platform? Do I want to find another way? Because basically, because the industry is an industry, you're partly in sales, which is crazy to say, but I'm saying it right now. That for some people, especially novelists and nonfiction folks, you're selling a book, and that means like you really need to sell more than more copies. Like my mom has bought copies of my book. That's great, but she's not like 30,000 people. You know, she's not able to call up agent to say, hey, my daughter writes poems. You should give her a $2 million advance. She'd be really happy about that, but that's unfortunately not the way it works. But you're already connected with your values. So I would just have like a heart to heart with yourself. And this is my best advice. Look at the writers you really love. What are they doing? How are they showing up? And think about how they're interacting in that capacity. That'll really help you out. One more. Cool.
I think a lot of us had questions about one of the poems in your book that was like the list of how long you walked or however many miles you walked, and at the time it had like a little comment.
Yeah.
Like yay or boo or whatever.
Yeah. So when I was writing this book, I was obsessed with writing every day. So I had like a journal. I wrote poems while I was physically walking. I stopped riding the bus because I don't have a car and the bus transportation system sucks in Austin. So I walked everywhere. So I walked anywhere between 3 miles to 7 miles. And what you notice when you physically move is that it's easier to tap into language. It's easier to think. So I didn't actually have any earbuds in. I wear earbuds all the time now, but I just walked. And the numbers that you see are like me tracking my steps. An old school like stepometer that ended up in the washing machine, which was very sad about. Didn't have an Apple Watch or anything. I just bought it online, little stepometer. It keeps tracking. You're supposed to like clip it into your bra, but I just kept it in my pocket. So I did that. And when I didn't get a lot of steps in, I said boo, because that meant I was probably depressed. So that was like kind of a little story behind that poem. All right. So thank you so much, y'all. You have been amazing. Any publishing questions? And still like hit me up. I'm online. So yeah, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.